Hey guys, Joe here from SimVRlabs, and I'm going to give you a quick little tutorial video on how to fix your yoke if it's clickable but not usable in realistic mode. For example, in this Just Flight Piper, I went ahead and deleted what I've done in the SimVRlabs mod, and I'm going to do it again and show you how I did it. So for now, you can see that it's not realistic, but it is ergonomic and it's kind of not very good. So let's fix it. So the first thing I'm going to recommend before you start doing any kind of editing of the VR config file or anything else is to go ahead and get Notepad++, because if you try to do this in standard Notepad, it's just not going to work out very well. So I'm going to open up the folder of the aircraft that I'm going to be working on, which is going to be the Just Flight Piper. And then you'll see two files in here that we care about right now. One is the VR config file, and one is the Cockpit Obj. Now, if your aircraft doesn't have a VR config file, you can make one by calling it whatever this ACF file is, followed by an underscore VR config, and it's a text file. And you can just end it with .txt, and it's going to make a file. And this is what it looks like if you just open it with Notepad, so it's pretty much unusable. So I'm going to right click it and click Edit with Notepad++, and then you can see Notepad++ makes it a lot more usable. When you do make a VR config, if you do, you have to have these 3 lines in it, just like you see it before it communicates with X-Plane. And then anywhere in the white space, you can make different types of manipulator tweaks or teleport hotspots. You can do it at the top, you could do it at the bottom. It doesn't really matter. So in this particular one, you can see there's no yoke stuff in it. There's just some knob stuff and some teleport stuff. So let's give it some yoke tweaks here. So I'm just going to come here to the white space, delete that mess. And the next thing I need is the Cockpit Obj in Notepad++. So I'm going to go back into my folder here, find my Cockpit Obj, right click, edit with Notepad++, and makes another tab. And there's my Cockpit Obj. A bunch of numbers, we don't need any of that yet. So when you make a manipulator tweak in the VR config file, you start everything with begin manip, and then you're going to give it some sort of tweak, and the particular tweak we're working with today is called Yoke Manip Translate, and then you always end with end manip. Okay, so we're doing a Yoke Manip Translate. And the first thing you want to do in the begin manip line is you have to define what kind of manipulator it is, and then define the data refs that you want it to work on. So we find that in the Cockpit Obj. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to search, find yoke. And then what we're looking for here is the Yoke Manipulator, and you'll see a bunch of different things under Yoke that we won't actually use, like this hide pilot toggle manipulator. We don't care about that one. We don't care about that one. We don't care about that one. Now this looks like more like what we care about. We're looking for something like this with some translations, some rotations, and then it's firing the yoke pitch ratio and the yoke roll ratio. Now this particular one does not have the manipulator we're looking for, so that's further on down in the Cockpit Obj. So I'm just going to next, and next, and next, and there we go. Now this looks more like what we're looking for, because we're looking for a manipulator that fires these 2 data refs right here, yoke roll ratio and yoke pitch ratio, and you'll see that it's right here. ATTR manip drag XY. Alright, So the manipulator type that we need to type into our VR config is drag XY. That's the type of manipulator it is. This one is a drag axis. That's for fuel switch left. Okay. This one's a radio. This one's a drag axis. Okay. So drag XY. That's the name of the manipulator for our yoke. That's the type of manipulator it is. So begin manip drag underscore XY. Alright, just like this one was command knob, this one's drag XY. And the next thing you do is you put the two data refs that it fires, which is right here. Sim cockpit controls, cockpit 2 controls yoke ratio, yoke roll ratio, and then yoke pitch ratio. I'm just going to copy and paste that right there. Now, begin manip. What type of manipulator it is, what type of data refs that it fires. And then yoke manip translate, here's where you put your numbers. So the first three numbers we want is the pitch X, Y, and Z axis. And that is your very first translation numbers right here. So anim begin is where all this starts. Anim end is where it stops. So this is all the code for that manipulator. So under anim begin, you're going to find your very first anim trans, and you care about the first three numbers right there. This is the x-axis, this is the y-axis, and this is the z-axis. Okay, x is left and right, y is up and down, and z is in and out. Okay, like towards you and away from you. All right, what we care about here is this negative number. We want this x to be a negative number. That means that you're on the left side of center. Okay, so the center of the aircraft, you want to be on the left side, which is the pilot side. All right, if that was a positive number, you would be working on the co-pilot's yoke, and the co-pilot's yoke is not supported right now. So we're caring about the yoke on the left side of 0, so that has to be a negative number. If you look down here, here's the whole chunk for the co-pilot side, and you'll see that the first number is positive, and that means you're on the co-pilot yoke. That's not what we want. We want the pilot's yoke. So I'm going to take the X, Y, and Z, and I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to put it, let's space a little bit and put it over here, because we want this on the right side of our chunk of numbers, and I'll show you why. So X, Y, and Z, and then I'm going to take and basically give it a little white space, come in here and do it again, and then give it a little white space, come in here and do it again. And then I'm going to basically set it up looking like this. So I have three distinct sets of numbers, okay? And what you want to do here is now you want to basically edit the z-axis of each one of these. You are defining how far it tilts forward and how far it tilts back as you move your VR controller in and out. So this one doesn't change. This one is center. This is what happens when you're not latched to the yoke and you haven't moved it yet. This is X, Y, and Z in that position. This is going to be when you've moved it towards you, okay? This one's going to be when you moved it towards you, and this is what it's going to be when it's moved away from you. Now, this one is always going to be a lower number, and we're going to start with 0.05 lower, okay? So this one's 0.71945. So I'm going to make this negative 0.76945. Now I said it's a lower number, and it is because it's negative. If this was a positive number, then I would go to 6694. But because it's it's a negative number, we want to actually go more negative. I know that's a little confusing, but it's just standard education. So then I want to go 0.05 higher in the middle on this one. So 0.05 on negative 0.71 is negative 0.66. Now that's a good place to start, is 0.05 up and 0.05 down. And then if it doesn't, if it's too fast to go forward and backwards or too slow, then you can tweak those numbers. You can maybe take them up to 0.06 of a difference to make it go slower, or 0.04 of a difference to make it go faster, if that makes sense. So that sets up our first part of this whole thing. That's the translation. Okay, the next part is you need to set the X, Y, and Z of your rotation, which is in the Cockpit Obj, and that is found under the roll ratio right here. It's these three numbers. So I'm looking for the roll ratio data ref, and I'm looking for the first three numbers. So I'm going to copy. It's 0, 0, and negative 1. Okay? And I'm going to put that right here. Okay? And then the very last thing we need is how much rotation it rotates when you actually roll. Now, if I look in here, I see a negative 60 right here. So I've got my X, Y, and Z, my 0, my negative 60, and then my 0 and my 1. The 0 and the 1 basically are the data refs. So it's at 0 when it's all the way to the left, and 1 when it's all the way to the right. And this 0 we don't really care about. This is the number we mostly care about, is negative 60. So in our VR config, we want to do negative 60, okay? And that's how much it rolls when it's to the left. Now we want to do the opposite of that, of how much it rolls when we go to the right, which would be 60. Now essentially this right here is the speed of how quickly it rolls. Now if everything lines up and you've put all these numbers in, it should be perfect. But I can show you that a lot of times it's not perfect, and if it's not, what to do. So for example, if your yoke is too fast to roll, you can raise these numbers and it'll slow your roll down. So if it's too fast, if I go in there and it's too fast, my next thing would probably be to try negative 80, maybe negative 90. That'll slow it way down. Or if it's too slow, I can go down here and do negative 45 and then 45, and that'll speed it back up. And then that's it. So you've got your three chunks of numbers here, this one, and this one. That sets your pitch. And then you've got the rotational axis right here, 0, 0, negative 1. That sets your roll. And then you've got your roll speed, negative 60 and 60. And I got all that information from the Cockpit Obj. And then I'm going to go in here and I'm going to save it. Okay, I've saved it there. Now let's jump back into X-Plane. And the real quick way to reload your aircraft is to come in here into Advanced menu, go down to Developer, and reload the current aircraft. And it will reload the VR config. Okay, now let's see where we're at. I'm going to readjust, and I'll grab it. Let me readjust more here, so I'm not at the boundaries. I'll grab it, and I'll roll it. And that looks like it's following pretty nicely. And then I'll go in and out, and that looks like it's pretty nice as well. So I think we're dead on just by using the numbers in the VR config. I'll grab it here, I'll grab it up at the tip, make sure we're good. Okay, looks pretty good. Now let me show you how to tweak it. So say that was not very good, and it was too fast. Say your rotation is too fast. So I'm going to go up here and change it to 90 and 90. Save it, and I'm going to jump back into X-Plane here. Reload. And now you can see it's much slower. See how the VR controller kind of slides up the handle of the yoke, slows it way down. It's not linear, but some of you might want a slower roll on your yoke, you might find that it feels better, easier to control. Now, what if you want slower on the pitch? Well, let's jump back in and look at that. So basically what I want to do is I want to raise the difference of the number of the z-axis away from center. So we're 0.05 away here and here. Let's make it 0.1 away. So that means this would become 0.81 and this would become 0.61. And we're twice as far away on our distance now as we were before. So let's jump back in and see what effect that has. Reload here. And now you can see how much slower it is. You see how my VR controller goes all the way in to the yoke handle. And then I got to pull all the way back out here just to get it out to me. So that's how you tweak that. And I hope this was helpful, guys. It kind of shows you how to fix your yoke issues if it's clickable. If it's not clickable, then that's a whole different scenario where you have to bring the actual model into the Cockpit Obj, which requires some software. And yeah, I hope this was super helpful, and I'll see you again probably in another tutorial video later on. This is Joe with SimVRlabs. Talk soon.